And some has been a long time. Aaron walked in and I said, I'm David. He said, I know you. He said, my name's Aaron. I said, we think it's probably at least 50 years, Aaron. Is that right? A long, long time. So good to see each one of you. In case y'all don't know, I'm David. I'm Pally's much younger brother, and I'm Donnie's much, much younger brother. Does that work? I always like to put that in. Keith used to torment me when I'd go see him and ask people, which one of us you think's the oldest? And he would get such a bang when they couldn't figure it out or think that I was older. That really made him happy. But we're glad to be here today, and thank you for coming. Thank you for all that you've done to put this together, and I want to thank you in advance. I hear there's going to be a pitch-in potluck dinner in the fellowship hall, and so I want to thank you in advance for everything that you did for that. We kind of know about what work goes into a potluck, pitch-in dinner, so thank you. In fact, we're having one at our church next Sunday. We have special services, so we're having come and join us. Joy tells people Hercules is known to have the best potlucks. We rarely, if ever, run out of food. Have we ever run out of food? And Joy says no. 55 years. So 50 years, at the 50th anniversary, 5 years ago, I was honored to be here with actually several more of our family were here. Keith was here. Ray, of course, as you know, has passed away, and 21 was here. I don't remember if Carlton was here. He has passed away. That would have been 18. Linda had already passed away. But a number of you were here. How many do you remember being here at the 50th anniversary 5 years ago? So a number of you, several of you were here. Aunt Betty and Aunt Carolyn, I know we're here. And so many of the community folk were here and local people, and y'all don't get praised near enough. But at that service, Paul or Ray or somebody, Carla maybe, had put together a little slide presentation, and I talked about the plan for a church and how it started in 1968. I was 11 years old, and I know you're already calculating, so I'll just tell you, 11 and 55 make 66. So I'm 66, if anybody's wondering. And I said last night, if I make it till December the 29th, Ralph, the government declares that I'm retirement age, and if I can convince Joy, then I think I'll be able to retire at 66 and a half. But so we talked about the plan to start the church, and then we talked about the property, this property, and we talked about the people. We had on the slide presentation several pictures of different ones. We talked about quite a few, and I saved until the last point, kind of as a surprise to the pastors, and we presented Pally and Daryl with a little plaque. I suppose they still have it. Yeah, this church has only ever had two pastors. Our parents started in 1968, and then Pally and Daryl came in 1992 to present, 31 years. So they've actually pastored longer by quite a bit than our parents pastored. I think that's quite remarkable for a church that 55 years only have had two pastors. Some churches go through pastors pretty rapidly, but that's the history of this church, and so we recognize them. This morning, before I say a whole lot more, I want to recognize what I'm calling the long-timers. The long-timers, and the long-timers I'll define as pre-Pally and Daryl. Pre-Pally and Daryl. So I'm going to name a few that I know, and then if there's anybody else here that was a part of the church that would be qualified as a long-timer. I know Diane, and of course Arlene, that we recognize and remember in memory today, the tremendous contribution that Diane and Arlene made. And then along came John, Diane and John, and Amiel. There's Amiel. Amiel, I like to tell the story about when we first moved to Turner Community. I was in 7th grade. Paul, I said it to Daryl yesterday, the bus driver. No, poor Kenny. Pattengill, Paul Pattengill was our bus driver. Diane was in the 7th grade, I was in the 7th grade, and she would talk quite often about her little brother's going to start school next year. Aaron was already in school, but Amiel hadn't started school yet, and she was so excited for Amiel to get to start to school next year, 1st grade. So Amiel was a part of the church back then. Christy, I remember Mother being so happy when Christy came along and was helping teach. Kathy and Patty, and who else was here before Pal and Daryl? We give you the designation of, okay?
Gavin, he was a baby, he was little.
Well, that counts. So he's a long timer. We're calling them long timers. Well, he's a little bit bigger than I am, I think. I'm sure he's faster. Long timers. So, all right, let's have the long timers stand. Patty? I'm going to talk about Don in a minute. But. All right, long timers. Patty, Kathy, Christy, Aaron, John, Diane. Who else wants to? Amber. Yep, she was okay. Long timers, have a stand, and we're going to give you a round of applause. You know, a lot of times, thank you, you can be seated. We talk about the pastor, but I tell you, the pastor without people is not a church. And so we thank you for that.
Janelle was a long timer.
Well, Janelle, that's right. She was here way back then. Do you have the picture of the Turner front steps? I want to point out a little bit of this picture. I know it's on the website, on the church website. I want to point out a few people. Of course, there's our dad. Where is Mother? Where?
No, that's not. Behind him says right.
She must be right behind that. Is that Mother behind that?
No.
That's Sister Huff.
Well, we can't lose her name.
Daryl says that's her.
No, I'm mistaken, since it's blown up. Would she been taking the picture?
Well, that wouldn't be common, but anyway, that's our dad. Of course, that's Daryl. There's Pally. This would be Alvin Fryer, Johnny Fryer.
David. There's Donna and Dana and me and
Look at that.
and Donna,
Dana,
my daughter.
David. Does anybody know who that fellow was?
I know.
We've changed a lot, so I'm not pointing out me on purpose. Up here is a man by the name of Mr. Bebow. Diane doesn't remember Mr. Bebow. Does anybody remember Mr. Bebow? Lived where Richard Myers, does he still live in the same place? He bought that, I think he bought that place from Mr. Bebow. Mr. Bebow drove a Volkswagen, and he would stop at our house, and we'd load the accordion and my violin, and a lot of times we'd ride over here with him. He could tell stories by the hour about the war. He was in World War I and World War II. I don't know what I would give to be able to sit down and listen to some of his stories. Talk about it. some of his experiences. I mean, he could tell it vivid and you just go to sleep, but I wouldn't today, as much as I've been interested in especially World War II. But that's Mr. Bebout. Esther, Rachel, anyway, you'll probably recognize quite a few of them. I wanted to point out, this gentleman, that's his wife, their name is Huff, Obie Huff. Obie Huff lived down at Kibler. He had a chicken farm. They raised eggs and fish. He had a pond where he grew catfish. Quite a few things. He was, see his hand? He didn't sit around and not do a whole lot. He was always doing something. Apparently got his hand in some machine and was injured. But he was always working. I want you to remember, we call him Brother Huff. I'm going to talk about Brother Huff at the close of the service. And I want to say a word about Don Wilkerson. Did you notice the pointer I'm using? A couple or 3 years ago, I went down to Don's and he had some sticks like this. And I said, Don, what's that? And he told me the story about the tobacco sticks. This is a tobacco stick. He gets them and David cuts them up and makes little gates that they sell and all different things. And I said, oh, I'd like to have a few of those. So I got a couple of handfuls and I drilled holes in each of them and I braided a little piece of rope like this. And then on each one of them, I wrote my grandchildren's name. And then with a magic marker and a little heart, and in the little heart I put the number that the grandchild was. So Connor is number 1, Caleb number 2. And I keep those in our garage, and when we have our annual vacation at Bunker Hill in Missouri, I take the walking sticks, and kids are excited to have their walking stick. The parents aren't very excited because they're afraid they're going to fall and jab them in their chin. And then sometimes when I walk at home, I take one of the kids, and that's the chance for me to pray, especially for that grandchild. Don, I'd like you to come up here just a minute, if you would.
David, I found your mother. She's second from the top on the top row. Here, give me that stick. Isn't that your mother right there?
That's what
By the post. By the doorpost.
No way. This is Sister Easley right now. I know my mother-in-law. Quit telling me when I'm wrong.
it looks like her at this. It almost looks like a man's tie.
She told me that I was her pastor, so I'm telling you, that's who that precious lady is.
David is at her house.
No, dear.
Here,
No, come on further in, right there.
here.
The next one. Right there.
No,
Oh,
that's
not-
a man. I told you. I go through this all the time. She just doesn't listen. That is not a tie. She's got a sweater on.
Don used to cut firewood. He cleared his place, and he sold green firewood for $7 a rick. I got the bright idea. Esther and I was in college at West Ark, and I got the bright idea of being the budding entrepreneur that I was going to be. Then I'd buy some firewood and take it to Fort Smith and sell it. So I took Dad's pickup and bought a rick for $7. I think I sold one for $9. I thought, boy, I'm in the money maker. So I bought another one. I took it over. I didn't have a buyer. I went door to door, I think halfway across Fort Smith. Finally sold a half of that rick. And I think I gave the other to Bill Carpenter. I'll turn around. I've got something I want to present to you. Presented to Don Wilkerson in recognition of over 50 years of loyal friendship. That's right.
I love you and your family. All of you. I appreciate y'all.
This one's mine. You gave me this one last summer when I was here. See that knot in it? That's a
Yeah.
special one.
I suspect that's just for
That is
you.
a very special. That's mine. The grandkids don't use that one. Doc Easterlin, do you remember Doc Easterlin? There you don't. He was the ag teacher for a while at Mountain Bird. He used to say, in my garden are many roses. Some are white and some are red. I want my roses now and not when I'm dead. I wanted to give you a rose. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, David. Good to do.
Good for you.
Oh, it-
I know it. Thank you for allowing me to do that, and thank you, Don. And again, thank you to all of the long-timers. You mean a lot to this church, and you are this church. And I want to talk just for a few minutes about something that I think is very important. The first passage of Scripture I want to bring to your attention is Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. Exodus 3, verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. This is the passage where Moses, you know, God had a plan for his life. For a while he ran, but God appeared to him, and he said, I want you to lead the children of Israel. And he appeared to him in a bush that burned, fire. Okay, hold that thought. Exodus chapter 13, just a few chapters over. Exodus 13, verse 2. Verse 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. Cloud by day, fire by night. Fire. One more passage over in Acts chapter 2. New Testament, Jesus had told the apostles, you tarry in Jerusalem, you tarry in the upper room. And in Acts chapter 2, verse 2 says, and suddenly they had been up there, they'd prayed, they'd waited. Suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. Three passages. God appeared to Moses in a burning bush. He led the children of Israel cloud by day, fire by night. And the Holy Spirit, who is still with us today, appeared to the New Testament church by way of a fire. This church was founded on a desire to experience God's presence in this church and at all times. Fire represents the presence of God, His love, and power. These three different passages we talked about in the Old Testament, and one in the New Testament, two in the Old Testament, one in the New Testament, indicate to us, tell us, that God's presence is represented by fire and His love and power. And as I say, this church was founded on a desire for God's presence. Our parents never aspired to be popular or famous or have any notoriety. They had a hunger to draw near to God, live a life that reflected His love, His comfort, His power. And that's why one of the main reasons, or the main reason I believe that they founded this church, because they wanted to experience and others to experience the presence, the reality of God. Scripture talks about it as fire. They wanted the presence. They wanted his love to flow out from them, his comfort. And that's how this church was founded, a desire to have that. I want to share with you two stories, one that I've read and one that I know. The first story is about a church member who had been absent from his church for a little while. The pastor got concerned and was going to pay a visit, make a call, and just check in on him. So he went to the man's door, knocked on the door, welcomed him in. After just a few pleasantries and few words of welcome, the man was sitting by his fireplace. Now, any of you know what an open fireplace is? We had one at the house where Pal and Daryl lived. We were talking about that this morning, I think, how a fireplace is a negative heat source. Joy talked about a time we came to their house, Mother and Dad had been gone a while, and for quite a while, we could still see our breath inside. I remember one time sitting at that fireplace that we were right up close. I was doing my history homework and dropped off to sleep. Mother was sitting there, and my homework assignment I was working on fell off my lap. She thought it was just a scrap paper I was throwing away, and she put it in the fire. I woke up, where's my homework? True story. I get to class tomorrow, and how many of you remember Mr. Dennison, Coach Dennison? He had little thin wire rim glasses, little reading glasses. They were real thin. I'm sitting there dreading, anticipating. Coach Dennison was looking through everybody's paper. In a little bit, he looked over those wire rim glasses and he said, "David, where's your assignment?" I told him the story, true story. He reared back and he said, "Now I've heard every excuse." So I guess he could retire. That kind of a fireplace, open fireplace, the church member, the pastor were sitting. The church member was fully anticipated to have some major reprimand for missing church and all of that. The pastor never said a word. He reached over, took a pair of tongs, and reached into the fire and took a coal and set it out of the fire on the hearth, out by itself, still not saying anything. The church member didn't say anything, so they just sit there for a while, sat. As a few minutes and time went by, that one coal began to fade and cool and finally turned black and died. But before it completely died, the pastor reached over with these tongs, picked it up, and put it back in the fire, where then it began to catch on and go again. And the pastor stood up, and as he left, the church member said, "Thank you, Pastor. I believe that's the most fiery sermon I ever heard. I'll be back in church Sunday." This church was founded on a desire to experience the fire. That is the presence, the love and power of God. I read that story, a story I know. Can you put the picture of the church back up there, Turner Community? I was noticing something in this morning that I'd never seen before, noticed before. Look over here, we looked at the people, but look over here. Isn't that glass missing out of that one? Two of them. Okay. So you read in the history of the church that the window panes were missing and had trouble keeping the place heated. It really was. This particular day may have been probably as either in the spring or the fall. I'm thinking it was in the spring, but a few jackets on. Brother Huff, we called him. So in the middle of that old Turner Community Building was when we were there, was a small, thin tin stove, right, Don? The wall was real thin. And so we would come and build the fire and try to get the fire going and try to get the fire. I remember G.T. Taylor was there one Sunday, and I remember him taking some asphalt shingles and putting it in the door of the fire to try to get the fire to get going a little faster. The asphalt and those asphalt shingles, the tar. Anyway, it'd take a while to finally ever get a fire going, and we had the benches around the fire and try to huddle up and stay a little bit warm. Brother Huff, we called him, quite often at the end of the service would say, well, it's about time to go. Everybody get a coal and put it in your pocket and let's go home. Now that doesn't quite jive with this other story I just told, but it's both about coals. I mean, you don't put one in your pocket, but I want you to grasp the point of everybody get a coal and let's go home, a piece of the fire. My message is short and simple today, and it's just this: keep the presence of God and pass it on. That's where this church was founded. That's what this church has always been about. And I want to challenge you to get a coal, put it in your pocket, take it home and keep it burning, and bring it back next Sunday and let it warm all week long. Let it bring comfort, let it bring love, let it shed the presence of God all week long, and then bring it back next Sunday and get it all fired up again, so that week after week and year after year, and if God tarries, who knows, another 55 years would be 110 years. You say it can't be. The church where we pastor was built as a school in 1900. That's 123 years now. This church, with God's help. John, those posts out there, the bottom of them, Daryl had me help him put new covering around it to kind of keep them up. Those posts are going to need to replace one of these days. We gave a temporary fix, but just so you know, there's going to have to be things kept up around here, and you've done an amazing job. I'm so thrilled with the beauty and getting a new paint job coming. You've gotten a new furnace. But the presence of God. It's not just the building. It's just the carpet, the equipment. It's God's presence. So my message is keep that presence and pass it on. There's a song I want the children are going to sing in closing. I just want to share with you some of the words before they come. It only takes a spark to get a fire going, and soon all those around can warm up and it's glowing. That's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced, you spread His love to everyone. You want to pass it on. What a wondrous time is spring, when all the trees are budding, the birds begin to sing, the flowers start their blooming. That's how it is with God's love, once you've experienced it. You see, my parents experienced something way back. Donnie and Pally know about back in those years when Mother and Dad first really got on fire for God. And that path led them all the way to Turner Community, where they spent the rest of their career just trying to spread the love and the presence, keeping the fire burning. And I want to challenge you this morning. That's my message. Keep the presence of God and pass it on. Children, share with us the last song.